My name is Ross Relyea. I'm 60 years old. I'm married to Melanie Brunet Relyea, lovely wife, 27 years now. I have two daughters from a previous marriage, Natalie and Melanie, and Natalie has three children who are lovely grandchildren for me, Rachel, Hannah, and Penny. Let's see, most of my work career has been in pharmaceutical manufacturing, but the last 8 years I have worked as a home inspector. Well, I first developed a joy for paddling in Boy Scouts, and we used to go up to the Adirondacks and paddle around in canoes. Then in 2005, we moved down to the shoreline in Connecticut when I took a job with Pfizer, and I was thinking about getting a canoe to go out into the ocean, and a couple of friends of mine suggested that I try kayaking instead because number one, you can go out with one person, and number two, the ocean might be just a little bit rough for canoes. So I took their advice, went out and bought a recreational flat bottom boat, and it was fun to paddle around in, but it really only worked in the smooth tidal estuaries because with it being flat bottom, it isn't very durable. It doesn't paddle well. So I did some research and went out and bought myself a nice touring boat. It was a current design Storm GT, which is optimized for rough water. It's a 17-foot bright green kayak, so all of my paddle friends recognize me from a long way off when they see me coming in the green machine. Well, making my own kayak, I've been a woodworker for years, and I was just thinking about going into doing something that would be more um, refined than just doing home improvement projects. And I was thinking, should I make furniture or should I make toys? Should I do something else? And when I got connected with the kayaking buddies down in Connecticut, it turns out the guy who leads the group is a guy named Nick Shada, who has a company called Gilmot Kayaks, and he designs and builds kayaks. So I thought, oh, building a kayak is way more interesting than making a chair. So I did some research, and I bought plans and watched some videos and read a lot of manuals on what to do, and sat down and built my own kayak. Started with plans and 13 cedar boards, and I ripped them and milled them all into the individual pieces and fitted them together. And it took me 3 days shy of a year to build it. As it turns out, I finished my MBA and my Lean Six Sigma Green Belt during that period of time. So it really turned out that going down and working on the kayak was my escape from reality because all I had to worry about was gluing two pieces of wood together and not research papers and other projects. The kayak that I built is named Arbor Velix. My daughter named it. She took Latin, and Arbor Velix is Latin for fast tree. The launch date was actually my brother's birthday. It was January 9th, 2010. I think it was 5 or 6 degrees out that day. We actually had to go to an alternate launch site because the original place we picked had frozen over because it was deep enough into the tidal estuary to not have enough salt water to stay free. So we launched in a 6-degree day, got some wonderful pictures. It was a nice sunny day, except that it was really cold out. But we had a great paddle. Arbor Velix is a 22-foot tandem. So me in the back controls the rudder, and the person in the front is just power. So the two people together actually can go quite a long ways. As far as adventures, probably the biggest one we had just before we moved back to Syracuse. A buddy of mine in Connecticut, his name is Ewan Ross. He and I decided that it was time to do an overnight adventure. So we paddled from Hartford, Connecticut down to the Long Island Sound. It's just shy of 60 miles, and we spent the night halfway at Heard State Park, which has campsites along the shore. Like most adventures, when things go wrong, it gives you things that are memorable. So there was a hurricane off the coast, and it kept spawning thunderstorms that kept zinging up past us. And the Connecticut River meanders, and it seemed like every time we meandered to the east, a storm would come up to the west, and every time we meandered to the west, the storm would come up to the east. But we finally got hit a couple of times with storms that rolled right up the river valley, so we ended up having to jump out of the water and hide under a rock ledge while the storm went by. But those were only momentary breaks. There was one other kind of interesting incident. We stopped for lunch at Gillette Castle, that's about 2/3 of the way down the river, and had lunch. And we didn't account for the fact that the tide still affects the water there. So when we parked, it was low tide and went up and ate lunch. And when we came back, the boats had just floated out into the water and were about to actually get swept away. We had just enough time to run out there and grab them. It would have been a tragic loss of 3 boats and all of our camping gear, but it also would have been a long walk home. One of the kind of goofy fun things that we did is we decided to take pictures of the undersides of every bridge that we passed under. And I believe there are 6 or 7 bridges from Hartford down to the Long Island Sound, both railroad and automotive bridges. So we took the underside of the pictures of those, and um, I think you can see them in the video. When I was in Connecticut, there was a broader mix of water because we had the ocean, we had the Long Island Sound, and we had several rivers to paddle in. So it was a little bit more varied. Now that I'm back up in central New York, with a little bit of a trip, you can go up to Lake Ontario, but most of the lakes around here are fairly calm. It's pretty kayaking and very enjoyable, but not quite as exciting as paddling out in the ocean.